RMJ movie reviews back again, people. So now I got I had heard about this documentary, I think like a year or two ago, and I just kind of dismissed it because I forgot about it. I never thought it would come out. And I was actually in Walmart yesterday, wandering around going to buy some stuff, and I came across the documentary Electric Boogaloo. Which is the wild, untold story of Canon Films. Anybody who grew up in the 80s, whether you were a little kid or whether you're a teenager, if you're old enough to remember watching entertainment from that time as it was coming out, we all know Canon Films. They had the little I think it's an octagon. I'm sorry, guys. I should know my shapes better than that. But I think it's an octagon. But as you can see on the cover here, it's got all our heroes. It's got Christopher Reeve. It's got the Ninja. It's got Lucinda from Breaking 2. Ninja 3 The Domination. We got Charles Bronson. You got Dolph. You got Sly. You got Chuck. You got Van Damme. Awesome cover. I really like this cover. But it's basically the story of two cousins who were from Israel. They were filmmakers from Israel, and they came to America to make it in the film industry. And they ended up having a low-budget film company called Canon Films, which, okay, for those of you guys who may not be familiar, watch the movie Cyborg with Van Damme, right? And at the beginning, it has the logo, which is like it goes dum dum dum. It's got that little octagon looking thing, and then it goes dum 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 dum, and it spreads apart, right? That's Canon Films. They released the American Ninja movies, a lot of Van Damme's early stuff, all the Charles Bronson Death Wish sequels, most of Chuck Norris's movies from the 80s, Masters of the Universe, Enter the Ninja, Revenge of the Ninja, Ninja 3 The Domination, King Solomon's Mines, Firewalker, tons of movies from the 80s. But basically, it just shows how these guys were maverick filmmakers. They made schlocky, low-budget films, and these cats were just reckless. It is really awesome. It's really awesome to hear the behind-the-scenes stories of how these cats were just hungry. I mean, these dudes were hungry. They actually, I don't think they were actually, in terms of some of their work ethic, I'll put it that way. Some of their work ethic in terms of trying to get the movie done and working as hard as you can, I think they were good at that. But I think as far as ethics, and I think that was probably the first guy, Menachem, I think is the one who was a little bit more crass, shall we say. But he directed Over the Top with Stallone, and he directed actually the Delta Force with Chuck Norris, which I actually think Delta Force is actually a good movie. I mean, they actually pull up some retro movie reviews on here about the Delta Force. One filmmaker was just like, this is just exploitation trash. Yeah, I mean, it was great. But it just basically shows how these guys were so hungry to make it in the film business, and they were so desperate. They just liked to make films, but the problem is their passion was so high that they often forgot about that. You actually have to have some boundaries. You actually have to have some ethics when you're making movies, and you actually have to fulfill your word if you give it to someone, which these guys were, they did whatever they had to do to get the movie made, but they weren't necessarily the most honest in fulfilling their promise. There's one story on there, and they interview almost practically everybody who's been in a Canon movie. Steve James, God rest his soul. I wish he could have popped up in there, but he's gone on. Michael Dudikoff's in there, Bo Derek's in there, Lundgren's in there. I can't remember the guy's name who was in King Solomon's Mines with Sharon Stone. Chamberlain, I think his name. He pops up in there. A lot of the actors who were in those movies. Guys from Breaking, Boogaloo, Shrimp, and Turbo. They pop up in there. Lucinda Dickens from Breaking 1 and 2 and Ninja 3 Domination. She's interviewed. All those guys and various other people who worked behind the scenes. Ivy Lerny pops up in there. A guy named Richard, I don't know, it's Englund. he actually did the visual effects, and he did some of the special effects on Poltergeist 1 and Poltergeist 2 from the 80s. He pops up in there. There's a lot of people who've worked in the industry who pop up in this movie. It's really kind of inspiring to just hear these guys' story. I think that's one thing, if I walk away from this documentary, I think that's one thing that it shows me, that if you really, although I don't want to have the ethics that Cannon Group had, I will say that if you combine good ethics with how hungry they were, I think you could really be a highly successful filmmaker. I mean, the thing was, their hunger was so high and they were so desperate to make films, they just didn't care about the product they were making. You know what I mean? And it's really interesting to hear behind the scenes stories of like Death Wish 2. Oh my God. And apparently Michael Winner, who directed Death Wish 1 through 3, apparently he, if you take a look at Death Wish 2, if that's any indication that maybe he had some serious issues. And even the writer and the actress who played Charles Bronson's daughter in that movie, who was, she was the one who was raped in the first movie, then raped again in the second one, then raped again for the second time, and then she fell out the window and impaled and blood spurted out of her mouth. Yes, I have seen the uncut version of Death Wish 2. I saw it on Encore Cable Network in 2000 or 2001 or something. It's nauseating. I like Death Wish 2, but that rape stuff with the maid and the mute girl, it was just too much. But even the actress herself, she said that it was upsetting. She said that, she was okay with doing hey, Charles Bronson Death Wish, blah blah blah. But she said the sex and the violence, and there was so much of it, and she said just especially particularly with her scene, it was combined together. She's gang raped. The other guy's Gary hopping on, and then she flies out the window and she's impaled and there's blood. And she just said that she just didn't want to be a part of it. The writer of the movie said that he was appalled by the movie. And he said what Michael Winner actually put in the film was not what was written on the page. I mean, yes, he said there was, a brutalizing type of scene, but it was nowhere near to the extent that Michael Winner added in. And actually, Alex Winter, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, they said that Michael Winter was pathological, sadomasochistic. They didn't have really kind words. He apparently had some serious issues. And if you watch Death Wish 2, you'll see that he might have just been flat out a sociopath who was a filmmaker. So poor Charles Bronson. Apparently, Charles Bronson, I guess, was in his 50s going into his 60s. They weren't too hyped on having older men like him doing movies back then, and I guess this was where he could find work. There you go. They talk a little bit about Sharon Stone too, and how she worked on the whatever the King Solomon's Mine and whatever those little Indiana Jones ripoff movies were called. But apparently, Sharon Stone is, according to the documentary, is not the nicest person in real life. And apparently, when they shot that King Solomon's Mines movie, they said all the South Africans hated her. Everybody hated Sharon Stone. And this is kind of cruel, but they said there's a scene where she's supposed to be dunked in some water. Apparently, all the South Africans peed in the water. And Sharon Stone was like, "Why does it smell like this?" That's just hilarious. That's an ultimate revenge on somebody who's an a-hole. It really is. And they talk a lot about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. They talk about Masters of the Universe, and of course they talk about the notorious Superman 4. Basically what killed Cannon Films was that these guys were spending money they didn't have. You know what I mean? They did the Stallone movie. They paid Stallone like $10 or $12 million to do Over the Top. That was why Stallone went and did that arm wrestling movie. And they talk about the problems with that movie. And basically, Over the Top, Masters of the Universe, Superman 4 killed that company because those were bigger budget movies. They should have stuck with what they were doing, which was smaller, $2 million movies, and you get a profit for them. But according to them, they did the Hercules, the first two Hercules movies with Lou Ferrigno from the 80s, which, my God, I used to watch those quite a bit, and I used to really like those movies. Embarrassingly, I admit it. But you know, Superman 4 was that was supposed to be a $30 million movie. They ended up $17 million. Masters of the Universe was $22 million. Over the Top, I think, was $25 million. I mean, for a company that was putting out $1 million, $2 million movies, I mean, that was and they spent money they didn't have, you know, and that sent them down. You know, but Michael Dudikoff tells a funny story of how, like, you know, they were telling Michael Dudikoff, "You're gonna be the next James Dean. You're gonna be a star. You're gonna be a star. You're gonna be a star." And apparently these guys would just make promises and just never come through with it, which is just, it's hysterical. And there's actually clips of the video footage of these guys making business deals and stuff, and it's crazy, man. And it sounds like they had quite an adventure. I don't care if their company went bankrupt or not. The fact that what these guys accomplished in schlock, low budget filmmaking, these guys lived an adventure. They were talking about how they filmed Invasion USA with Chuck Norris, and how, like, apparently there was like this street of houses that was gonna be torn down, and they were actually gonna turn it, like, I guess, like for an airport strip. So the filmmakers got permission from the city to use this to shoot part of Invasion USA. So, you know, you got that scene in Invasion USA where, like, the terrorists are going around blowing up houses and stuff. They got permission to blow up these houses because they were going to destroy them anyway. And it's wild to think that they actually drove tanks and bombs, and it's absolutely insane. I can say one thing, as a person who aspires to get in this business, that's what I'm talking about. That's a night's work. Not going to work and punching in on the clock and, oh yeah, you want this, you want this. No. I want to go to work and blow something up. That's my dream. It just looks awesome, man. It looks so awesome. But it's a very interesting documentary. It's also fun, too, to hear behind-the-scenes tidbits. I would have liked for them to have talked about American Ninja 2 and 3 and 4, but they talk about the first one briefly. Dudikoff gives a good interview. Dolph Lundgren just was like, hey, I'm gonna get a paycheck. You know, I think Dolph Lundgren might have been like 29 or 30. He was like late 20s, early 30s. But, you know, Dolph Lundgren pretty much just like, hey, look, I'm embarrassed by this whole thing. You know, he was embarrassed by it, and he said he felt weird, you know, looking at the midget in the costumes. Excuse me, guys, the little person in the costume, and they said the whole thing was just weird doing it. And I'm trying to think. Back to Breaking. They talked about Breaking 2, and interesting. The two stars, Boogaloo, Shrimp, and Turbo, or whatever their names was, they actually did not like. They were resentful against Lucinda Dickens because she wasn't a break dancer. She was actually like a jazz dancer actress, but they were resentful towards her. And, you know, Lucinda Dickens, she did an interview. She said, Boogaloo, Shrimp, let it be known, like, hey, you're not on our level. You can't do all this and that, you know. And apparently there was friction. And another thing that's crazy, they actually filmed Breaking 2 like a couple months after they filmed Breaking 1. They didn't even let Breaking 1 go and make money first. They literally, and, you know, the actors talk about how, like, they just thought Breaking 2 was just a goofball movie and it was a cartoon, and how, I guess, like, they were filming the movie in East LA, and they said they're walking around dancing with neon shirts on and stuff, and it's just hysterical. What's his name? Boogaloo Shrimp said he actually cried about the goofiness of Breaking 2. It's just hilarious. Lucinda Dickinson was just like, the scene in the hospital is just so silly. It's just, they apparently, I don't think they like Breaking 2. Yeah. But they apparently, those were like this. Runaway Train, Breaking 1 and 2 was like some of their most successful movies, you know. And I don't know, they didn't talk about, I think American Ninja did okay, but they don't talk about that. But it's pretty insane to hear that these cats are putting out 50 movies a year. I can't, let's see, there's 12 months in a year. Average movie, well, then again, these are low budget movies, so maybe you're talking, maybe it might have taken maybe a little bit over a month to film these movies. I cannot imagine 50 movies a year. I don't even know how that's possible, and apparently, I don't even know where they were getting the money from, but apparently you found out at the end of the documentary, I mean, they owed the banks, because I guess they were getting loans, I guess, from a bank to finance these movies, and they ended up going bankrupt because they owed the bank like millions and millions and millions of dollars. But I mean, and they were also saying how like they were like spending their money unwisely too. Like they could have financed Superman 4 and had that just the one movie they were working on, but they were still trying to do 10 other movies and Superman 4. So you've got $2 million being split 10 ways, and then you want to go make a big blockbusters Warner Brothers movie for $30 million when they should have just, the one movie for the company should have just been Superman 4, But really interesting and adventurous story. It's I think Bo Derek tells a story of how she saw some advertising for this film she did for him, and she saw these pictures of her face, like with the name of the movie, and she was like, where are these pictures come? These guys went into her personal belongings, stole Bo Derek's personal photographs, and used them as the advertisements for the movie. That is the craziest thing I've ever heard, man. It's hilarious. It's insane. Old girl from Conan the Destroyer pops up. Olivia D'Abo, whatever her name is. Really interesting to see her. I've never actually seen a physical interview with her. Really hilarious to hear her talk about some Bo Derek movies. Like some movie where like Bo Derek's husband like gets skewered in the balls by a bull. And then there's like at some point in the movie, Bo Derek points at him and goes, that thing is gonna work again. And then like the movie ends where they're like getting it on in front of a neon sign that says ecstasy. It's hysterical. These guys were insane. And I tell you, if it wasn't for the fact that they couldn't fulfill promises and they were so financially irresponsible, I really straight up think these guys would have been millionaires. But you gotta be on top of your money. I mean, Wesley Snipes, showed you that, and even Will Smith talked about it too. You get in this game where there's so much money, you gotta be on top of your financial business. You have to, or you'll sink. Which is what happened with them. Superman 4 killed them. And it killed everybody else too, because that movie is universally loathed across the board. But fantastic documentary. I'm telling you, this thing is so awesome and so insightful into the movie game and how it works. This actually inspired me to work harder to get into this business and be the best that I can, because these guys were like, I mean, there's a hilarious story from them filming Delta Force, and they said one of the actresses who was one of the hostages on the plane, I think it's Shelley Winters, I think is the actress. I think that's her name. I could be wrong. I'm sorry, guys. But apparently she got into it with Menachem Goldwyn, or whatever his name is. She got into it with him. And she was like, I guess they were shooting this movie actually in Israel. And Robert Foster says like it was like 120 degrees on that. Can you imagine shooting? And this is a real airplane. This ain't like no rich, James Cameron movie where you got like an airplane set. This is a plane they're shooting on, And I guess Shelley Winters was like, I'm dying. I can't take it anymore. And I guess Menachem Goldwyn looked at her and said, well, look here. You do the shot, then you die when it's done. I'm like, that takes a pair of balls. It's hilarious. But I love this documentary. It's awesome. Anybody who's interested in filmmaking, you need to watch this documentary. And anybody who grew up in the 80s on all these movies, because I own a couple of their movies here, gotta watch this documentary. It's so worth it to hear. These guys had a blast. I don't care if they went bankrupt or not. If you could do that well from, the early mid 80s till the late 80s, I mean, I'm sorry, those guys are successful. I don't care if they went bankrupt or not. I mean, I'm working a regular job right now. I would dream to be able to do something like American Ninja or even Masters of the Universe. I don't care if it's a financial hit or not. I just love to just be able to do it, say I did it. But subscribe to my channel, thumbs up the video, comments down below. Let's talk about Electric Boogaloo, the documentary. I might have missed some facts about Canon Films. You guys who are film nuts and film buffs like me, put any comments you want down below about their movies, whatever. A lot of good stuff here in this documentary. I wish it was almost 3 hours. I wish it was. I'm done talking about it. It's awesome. RMJ Movie Reviews. I'm going to come back again with my last couple holiday movie reviews. I will see you soon.